The cage was cold, and the floor was metal. She sat with her knees pulled to her chest. Shivering, the lights above were too bright, but she didn't look up. Her silver skin was marked with old bruises. Her long white hair tangled. Around her were others like her, scared and silent. The auction was starting soon. The noise outside the bars was loud voices shouting, laughing, bargaining. It was another slave market. Another nightmare. She was Ilari, a fragile alien species often sold to cruel masters. She had stopped counting how many times she had been captured. Pain, hunger, chains, these things were normal. Now hope was long dead. A loud buzzer rang. The cages opened one by one. Guards pulled them out roughly and lined them up. Buyers watched from behind thick glass, pressing buttons to bid. Her heart beat fast. But not from fear, she was numb now. Her turn came, and the guard dragged her to the center. Zalari female, age unknown, still healthy, the auctioneer said. A light shone on her face. She kept her head down. Starting bid, 1,000 credits. Voices began to shout prices, each higher than the last. She didn't care who won. She expected pain, darkness and chains as always. Then the room went quiet. Everyone stopped bidding. Someone had placed a high bid so high no one could match it. She looked up confused. In the shadow stood a tall figure, covered in a long coat. His face was hidden, but his voice was clear and soft. "I'll take her." The guards froze for a moment, then nodded quickly. They had no reason to argue. The deal was done. She waited for the slap, the collar, the chains, but instead, the man stepped forward slowly. He didn't touch her. He looked at her, not with hunger or anger, but with calm eyes. Then he took off his coat and wrapped it around her shoulders. "You're cold," he said gently. She didn't move, too shocked to react. He turned to the guards. "We're done here." He walked out, and the guards pushed her to follow him. No chains, no shocks, no threats. Her feet moved on their own. She followed him through the dark hallways of the station. Other buyers stared. Some laughed. "Waste of money." Someone muttered, "Humans are weird." But the man said nothing. He led her to a small ship gray, simple, clean inside. Everything was quiet. He pointed to a seat. "You can sit." He went to the controls and started the engine. As the ship took off, she sat frozen, the coat still around her. She waited for the real treatment to begin. Maybe he was just acting nice in public. Maybe he'd lock her up after launch. She waited for the blow, the command, the chain, but none came. Hours passed. He didn't even look at her. He brought her food warm and fresh. He placed it on a tray near her, then walked away. She didn't touch it at first, thinking it was poisoned, but the hunger was too strong. And she took a bite. It was real food, not slave ration, not trash. She finished it quickly, still watching him from the corner of her eye. That night he showed her a room, a bed, a blanket, a small screen with soft music. "You can rest here," he said. "The door won't lock." Her hands trembled. "What do you want from me?" she asked finally, her voice barely a whisper. He looked at her, silent for a moment. Then he said, "Nothing." She didn't believe him. No one ever wanted nothing. But he left the room without another word. She sat on the bed for hours, waiting for him to return, waiting for the real horror to begin. But the door stayed open, and the silence was kind. For the first time in years, her eyes closed slowly, and she slept without fear, still not trusting, still not believing, but resting in her dreams. She saw the past chains, screams, fire, but then the coat returned in her memory, warm, gentle, soft. That man-human was different. She didn't know why, and she didn't know for how long it would last. But something felt different this time, and it scared her more than pain ever did. Asterisk. She woke up because of silence, not noise. There were no footsteps, no alarms, no screaming, only the quiet hum of the ship, like a heartbeat in the walls. For a second, she thought she had died. But then she felt the blanket, the soft one still wrapped around her legs. Her eyes opened slowly, expecting chains or cold metal bars. But the room looked the same as last night, clean, small, and warm. There were no locks on the door, no cameras watching her, just a small blinking light near the ceiling and soft music still playing from the wall speaker. She sat up, her body tense, every muscle ready for pain. But nothing happened. No one shouted at her. No shock collar buzzed. She stood up carefully and walked to the door. It slid open by itself. Her breath caught in her throat. Free movement was usually a trick, something to trap her. Still, her legs moved forward, unsure and quiet. She stepped into the hallway, where soft lights lined the floor edges. The walls were gray-blue, smooth like skin. There were no chains, no weapons on display, no blood stains. It didn't look like a slave ship. It looked like a home. She heard a faint sound from the other end of the hall. The human was there, standing in front of a round window, watching stars pass by. She paused, unsure. He didn't turn to look at her, but he spoke anyway. "Good morning," he said. Softly, "Did you sleep well?" She said nothing. She didn't know how to answer. No one had asked her that before, not like they meant it. After a moment, she whispered, "Yes." He turned around then, his face now visible in the low light. He didn't look like a hero, or a soldier, or a king. Just tired. Dark circles under his eyes, stubble on his chin, a scar under one brow. But his eyes were clear and calm, like deep water. "I'm making something to eat," he said. "You're welcome to join. Or you can stay in your room." Again, he walked away without touching her. Without forcing her, she followed, slowly. The kitchen was small but bright, with smooth white counters and a soft smell of something warm. He was slicing fruit, real fruit from earth, not synth food. He handed her a plate without a word, then sat down across from her at the small table. She stared at the food, then at him. "Why are you doing this?" she asked finally, voice tight. "Why buy me if you don't want to hurt me?" He didn't answer right away. Then he sighed and said, "Because you were about to be sold to someone who would." She didn't understand. "That's it?" "Yes," he said. "That's it. But I'm property," she whispered. Slave. "Not anymore," he replied. "Not with me." Her hand shook as she held the fork. She couldn't believe it. "You expect me to trust you?" she said, bitter now. "After everything I've seen?" "No," he said. "I expect you to take your time." The food tasted sweet, but it made her chest hurt, like swallowing hope and not knowing if it was poison or real. After breakfast, he showed her around the ship. One level only, no locked doors, no secret labs. He explained the controls, the bathroom, the emergency room. She kept waiting for the lie to appear, but it didn't. Every hour felt more strange, more dangerous, not because of pain, but because of peace. The ship was soft not in its walls, but in its silence, in the way it didn't threaten her, didn't control her, didn't punish her. And that made her feel more off balance than ever before. That night, she stared at the ceiling in her bed. Still awake, she thought of escaping, running at the next planet stop. But she didn't know where she'd go. More than that, she didn't know why she was afraid of staying. The human had given her a name again. Not a number, not a label. He called her Lyra, the name from her old life, long before the cages. No one had said that name in years, not even her, and somehow, hearing it broke something inside her. She didn't cry, not yet, but she felt it building. Like a storm far away. For now, she only whispered the name again in the dark. Lyra, as if saying it might make it real again. And somewhere beyond the metal walls, the stars kept moving, cold and bright. But for the first time, she didn't feel like she was drifting alone. She stood by the window and stared at the stars. But her mind was already planning the exit. The kindness was too much, too strange. It couldn't be real. Nothing in her life had prepared her for soft blankets, warm food, and unlocked doors. No chains, no commands, no pain, just silence, and that silence was terrifying. For 3 days, she had wandered the human's ship. Lyra, that's what he called her, had watched him fix wires, cook meals, read old books. He barely spoke, only smiled or nodded when she passed. He treated her like a guest, not a prisoner, but she knew better. Everyone wants something, eventually, and before that something came, she had to run. The opportunity came when the ship landed for fuel, a small outpost station on the edge of Sector 9. No guards, just droids, dust, and faded neon signs. He walked out first, his voice calm. "I'll be 10 minutes." She nodded, keeping her expression still. He didn't lock the door. She waited 5 long breaths, then ran. Her feet hit the floor fast. Silent, practiced, she slid past 2 storage crates, slipped behind a fuel truck, and vanished into the back alleys of the port. She didn't know where she was going, she just needed to get away. Away from that calm voice, that warm food, that dangerous kindness. She moved through crowds of aliens, blinking lights, trade booths. A familiar tension returned to her chest. Fear and freedom tangled together. She found a quiet corner behind an old supply shack and crouched there, breathing hard, her heart punching her ribs. She expected footsteps, shouting, alarms, maybe even a hunter drone, but no one came. 5 minutes passed. Then 10, she peeked out, no sign of him. He hadn't followed, she was free, so why did her stomach feel heavy instead of light? She leaned her head against the metal wall. This was what she wanted, wasn't it? Then she heard a voice, not shouting, not angry, just calm, quiet, nearby. "You're not very good at hiding." Her whole body froze. She turned, slowly. He was there, standing a few feet away, holding a small bag of supplies in one hand. No weapons, no cuffs, just standing. Like he had followed her out of curiosity, not anger. She braced herself for punishment, for control, but he just looked at her with tired eyes. "I wasn't trying to catch you," he said. "I just saw you run." She swallowed, her hands clenched. "Then what do you want now?" He shrugged lightly. "Nothing." She stared at him, confused and angry. "You bought me," she said, voice shaking. "I belong to you." "No," he replied. "You don't." Silence dropped between them like a heavy curtain. She didn't know what to say. He stepped back, setting the bag down. "There's a shuttle bay 2 blocks that way," he said, pointing. "They'll take you anywhere you want." She blinked. "You're letting me go?" "Yes," he said. "You never owed me anything." She wanted to scream, to cry, to ask why. No one acted like this, not in her world, not in any world she knew. He turned to walk away, slow and quiet, like she was just another stranger in the crowd. She could leave now, right now. She looked at the alley, at the freedom waiting there. Then she looked back at him, walking alone, fading into the dust. And something cracked inside her, not fear, not anger, something deeper. She ran again, this time toward him, not away. Her voice broke as she shouted, "Wait!" He stopped but didn't turn. She reached him, breathless. "Why?" He looked over his shoulder. "Because I'm human," he said softly. "And you deserve to choose." She had never heard those words before. Not from anyone. He walked away again, heading toward the ship. This time she followed, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. That night, she sat on the ship again, in her room. The door was still unlocked. The stars outside were still drifting, and her name Lyra still echoed in her heart. She had been ready to run forever, but for the first time she had stopped, not because someone forced her, but because someone had let her go, and that kind of freedom was more terrifying than chains. The first thing she noticed was the sky. It wasn't just blue, it was endless. No metal ceiling, no glowing panels, no prison walls above her head, just open space. Clouds moving like soft creatures, sunlight pouring like gold. Lyra couldn't move, couldn't breathe. She stood at the edge of the landing platform, her eyes wide, her hands shaking. "This is real?" she whispered. Behind her, Elias only nodded. "This is Earth," he said. "My home." A cool breeze touched her skin, gentle but strange. It didn't sting, it didn't burn. It didn't carry commands, it carried the smell of trees, rivers, and something she had no word for: freedom. He had brought her here without chains, without questions, After she chose to return to the ship, he simply asked, "Do you want to see where I come from?" And she had said yes. She didn't know why. Maybe because he had let her go. Maybe because she needed to know if his world was as strange as he was. Now she stood in a quiet clearing, surrounded by tall green trees that moved gently in the wind. A real sun warmed her face, and the soft ground under her feet didn't hum like metal. No guards, no fences, no cameras, just earth. She reached out and touched the trunk of a tree. Surprised by the rough texture, everything here felt alive. "Why did you bring me here?" she asked, still not turning toward him. "I thought you should see it," Elias replied. "I thought maybe you'd understand why I care." She looked around. Children were laughing in the distance, their voices floating like music. They were chasing each other, free and barefoot, not afraid of anything. No one stared at her. No one pointed at her silver skin. A woman smiled at her and waved from across a wooden bridge. Lyra flinched, but the smile stayed, warm and harmless. "You don't belong to anyone here," Elias said quietly. "No one does." She shook her head. "That's not how the galaxy works." He shrugged. "Then the galaxy is wrong." They walked through a small garden path, flowers blooming in strange colors, bees buzzing lazily. In the air, he handed her a piece of fruit from a tree, red and soft. "Bite," he said. She looked at it, uncertain, then took a small bite. Juice dripped down her fingers, sweet and sharp. It tasted like nothing she'd ever known. For a moment, she forgot the ships, the cages, the pain. For a moment, she was just a girl under a tree, eating fruit with the wind in her hair. Later, they sat by a lake where water rippled in silver circles. Elias threw a small stone across it. It skipped 3 times and vanished. She tried to copy him, but her stone sank without a sound. He chuckled. "Try again." She did, and this time it skipped once before dropping. Her lips twitched into something strange, something almost like a smile. "You're not what I expected from a human," she said. "Most people aren't what you expect," he replied, tossing another stone. "But most don't get the chance to prove it." That night, she stood alone on the balcony of the place they were staying. The stars above Earth looked softer than they did from the ship. Not cold, not distant, just quiet. She wrapped the blanket around her shoulders and looked down at the lights of the city far below. Music floated up from somewhere, soft and slow. She thought of all the places she had been: dark markets, slave pens, cargo ships. She thought of the people who had used her, broken her, erased her name. And now she thought of this world, this strange planet where no one tried to own her, where a human had called her by name and offered nothing but freedom. She didn't trust it completely. Not yet, but for the first time she wanted to. Elias found her still awake, her eyes on the stars. "Do you ever miss the rest of the galaxy?" she asked him. He sat beside her. "Sometimes," he said, "but Earth reminds me what we're supposed to be." "And what's that?" she asked. "Better," he said simply. She looked at him, her heart quiet, but not numb, not this time. "Maybe you're right," she whispered. And when she finally fell asleep that night, it wasn't from exhaustion, it was from peace. It started with a sound she hadn't heard in months. A low click, followed by a mechanical whine. Too soft for humans to notice, but her ears caught it instantly. Lyra froze in the hallway of the small Earth cabin, a teacup warm in her hands. That sound didn't belong on Earth. It belonged in slave ships, back rooms, dark cages. The sound of a tracking beacon unlocking. She dropped the cup, and it shattered. Elias rushed in from the other room, concern on his face. What happened? But she wasn't looking at him. She was looking past the wall, through it, as if her eyes could see into space. "They found me," she whispered. He didn't ask who they were. He already knew. The past she never talked about had finally caught up. And it hadn't come quietly. 3 hours later, a signal came through orbit. An unregistered ship, cloaked and armed. No calls, no codes, no names. But Lyra felt the weight of it, like cold hands on her back. Her body remembered before her mind did how it felt to kneel, to obey, to vanish into fear. No, Elias said firmly when she began packing. You're not going anywhere. They'll destroy this place, she said, her voice flat. You don't understand who they are. I don't care, he said. You are not a prisoner anymore. She looked at him, fire behind her silver eyes. I wasn't just a slave, she said. I was owned by a syndicate, not a person. He paused but didn't look away. I know, he said. That's why we fight. The next night, the stars above Earth burned red. The unknown ship broke through Earth's orbital shield like it was paper. No warnings, no messages. They came for her, not to ask her back, but to make an example of what happens to those who escape. She watched from the control room as the enemy ship hovered over the forest edge. Not huge, but fast, a hunter craft, built to grab and vanish. I need to surrender, she said, standing up. They'll stop if I go. No, Elias said, strapping a weapon to his chest. They won't stop, they'll just win. Lyra stepped in front of him, her hands shaking. Then why fight? He looked her dead in the eyes. Because you deserve more than running. The first blast shook the trees, burning holes through the soil. He shoved her down as sparks flew overhead. Shielding her with his own body, she cried out, Why are you doing this? He answered through clenched teeth. Because I made a promise. To who? To myself, he said, that if I ever saw slavery again, I'd burn it down. The fight was short and brutal. They weren't soldiers, but they knew how to kill. She watched Elias get shot in the shoulder, blood blooming through his shirt. He didn't stop, didn't fall. He took down 2 of them before collapsing behind a tree. She ran to him, ignoring the heat, the danger. He looked up at her with pain in his eyes, but also something else, peace. I'm glad you came back, he said, voice cracking. She pressed her hands to his wound, trying to stop the blood. I'm not running again, she whispered. His smile was faint. Good. One last enemy approached, silent and armored, weapon aimed at Lyra's back. She didn't see it, but Elias did. He rolled over, raised his weapon, and fired. The blast echoed through the trees, and the attacker dropped. Elias fell back, his breathing ragged. She held his face, tears now falling freely. You stupid human, she said, voice shaking. You were supposed to let me go. I did, he whispered, and you came back. When the fight ended, the ship above began to rise, wounded, smoking, but escaping. Lyra stood, her eyes cold now, focused. She picked up the fallen weapon, her hands steady. She aimed toward the sky and fired the last round directly into the exposed engine. The explosion lit up the night, and then silence, real silence, the kind that comes after a battle is won. Later she sat beside Elias, his arm in a sling, but still alive. She didn't speak, not for a long time. Then she said quietly, They'll send more. I know, he replied, so let's be ready. She looked at him, and this time, her face wasn't scared, it was determined. Because this wasn't about running anymore, this was war, and she wasn't a slave. She was a survivor, and soon, she would become something more. Asterisk, she could have left. The next morning, the shuttle was ready, fuel full, skies clear, flight approved. One step into the transport, and she would vanish again. No chains, no orders, no one to stop her. She stood at the edge of the ramp with the wind blowing through her hair, and she didn't move, not forward, not backward, just still, because for the first time in her life, no one was deciding for her. Not a master, not fear, not survival, only her. Inside the cabin, Elias sat on the couch, arm in a sling, reading a report on his broken datapad. He didn't ask her to stay, not even once. He didn't look up, even when he heard the shuttle's engine start. Because he had meant it, she was free. But then the engine powered down, and the door didn't open. Footsteps approached instead. He didn't have to look to know it was her. I thought you'd be halfway to the outer rim by now, he said quietly. I thought I would too, she replied, stepping into the room. But I couldn't. Why? She took a deep breath, her voice steady now. Because I'm tired of running. He turned to face her slowly. There were no tears in her eyes, no fear, just clarity. She sat across from him, folding her hands in her lap like it was her own home. "I want to fight," she said. "Not just for me, for others like me." He nodded once, not surprised. "You'll be hunted," he warned. "More ships will come, worse than before." "I know," she said. "Let them come." The next days were not filled with rest. They were filled with preparation. He taught her how to repair the ship's systems, how to use tools and code. Locks, she learned fast, her hands no longer shaking when holding a weapon. She wasn't the same girl who had hidden behind crates, waiting to disappear. She was learning to face the galaxy with open eyes. She cut her long white hair short. Her choice, her change. She modified her old slave collar into a wrist device, a tracker repurposed to track them. She trained in the forest every day, not to run faster, but to stand stronger. She asked questions, demanded answers, built skills. Elias never gave orders, only guidance. They were partners now, and for the first time, she believed in that word, one. Night, as they sat near the fire pit outside the cabin, she looked up at the stars. They no longer felt cold. "I want to build something," she said. "A place for runaways, for fighters." He raised an eyebrow. "A rebellion?" "No," she said. "A refuge." He smiled. "You've changed." She turned to look at him, her face lit by the firelight. "I didn't change," she said. "I returned." "To what?" "To who I was, before they broke me." Elias reached into his coat and pulled out a small round device. "Then maybe it's time we send a message," he said. She took it in her hand, unsure. "What kind of message?" "The kind that scares the people who think they still own you." The next day, their signal hit 3 systems. Encrypted but clear, a woman with silver skin and fire in her eyes appeared on dozens of hidden networks. Her voice calm, but sharp. "Like a blade. They bought me. They hurt me. They told me I would never be more than a number. But I remember my name, and I remember freedom. If you're still out there hiding, surviving, come find us. We're not running anymore." Lyra turned off the transmitter and set it down. Her heart was pounding, not from fear, but from purpose. She turned to Elias and said, "Now we wait." "No," he said. "Now we prepare, because soon someone would answer that call, and when they did, she would be ready, no longer a slave, no longer a shadow. She had chosen to stay, to stand, and to fight, not just beside him, but as his equal. Asterisk, they didn't come all at once. They came in whispers, in shadows and silence, one by one. Broken ships landed in the forest clearing, and from those ships stepped beings who carried the same haunted look Lyra once wore. Eyes that had forgotten how to hope, hands that didn't know how to rest. She stood there to greet them, not as a guard, not as a leader, but as one of them. She remembered what it felt like to arrive in fear. So she smiled first, and they followed her in. The old cabin became a command center. The tool shed turned into a medic room. The forest was no longer just trees. It became home, a place where voices were free, and names were returned. Lyra moved through the camp with quiet strength. She trained them, fed them, listened to them. Not everyone wanted to fight. Some only wanted peace, a place to breathe. She gave them that too, because she understood what power really meant now, not control, but choice. Word spread, even through silence. The syndicate sent scouts, but they didn't return. They sent ships, but the camp was gone by the time they arrived. Lyra's people were mobile now, scattered and smart. A network, not a target. And in every corner of space, someone whispered the same line. She was a slave once, they said, but not anymore. One night, Elias sat beside her on the ramp of the ship, looking up at the stars. He had healed, but the limp in his leg stayed. She joked it gave him character. "I think they're ready," he said, nodding toward the fire circle where young fighters trained. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she stared at the flames, watching them dance. "They'll have to be," she said, "because this doesn't end with hiding." He smiled. "You want to take the fight to them?" "No," she said. "I want to burn down the system that let them exist." They gathered on the eve of the strike. Hundreds now former slaves, smugglers, ex-soldiers, refugees, each one different, but all of them free by choice. Lyra stood in front of them with no armor, no weapon, only her voice. "I was not born in chains," she said, "but I learned to live in them. I was not born for war," she said, "but I was forced to survive one. They took my name, my body, my will, but they didn't kill my mind. And now my mind is what they fear most." The plan was sharp, precise, and fast. They hit the central auction ship first, the same model where she was once sold. No warning, no mercy, doors blown open, collars torn off, data stolen, and broadcast across 10 systems. Elias led the hacking team, planting evidence that brought syndicate leaders into the light. Lyra freed the cells with her own hands. She looked each prisoner in the eyes and said, "You're not property." The last slave she freed was a young girl with glowing green skin and silent tears. She looked up at Lyra and asked, "Are you a soldier?" Lyra shook her head. "No," she said. "I'm just someone who remembers." When the syndicate finally fell, it didn't happen with one battle. It happened because too many people stood up at once. Too many voices spoke the same truth. Too many hands refused the chains, and at the center of that storm stood the woman they once bought. Now feared, now followed, now free. Years later, a statue stood near a rebuilt station in the heart of neutral space. It wasn't made of gold or stone. It was made of scrap-old slave collars melted into shape. It showed a girl, one hand open, one fist closed. The plaque at the bottom didn't list titles, only words. She was bought. She was beaten. She was broken. But she remembered, and she saved us all. Elias stood beside it, older now, quiet as ever. A child nearby asked, "Is the story true?" He smiled. "Every word," he said, and above them, the stars moved again. But they no longer watched a slave. They watched a savior, and her name was Lyra.